Hello and good evening, everyone. Hey, I see there's lots of people commenting already in the chat. Great to have you guys here. Thank you for joining me. That's Silver, IC Crusader, Hebrews 11, Villainous, Justified, Janice. Tom, welcome. Hello, everyone. Let's just go through some of the comments. Silver says, Muslim logic, Isa is not God, but Ruh al-Qudus is Jibreel, falls on floor. Yes, the brain falls on the floor. Yep, thank you. Yeah, exactly. There's no consistency. So I'll go through the rest of the comments in a moment. Thanks all for joining me. It's 7 p.m. or a minute after on Sunday here in Warsaw. And yeah, I know some of you are joining us at like from 3 o'clock in the morning from Australia. Villainous, thank you very much for doing so. And Philip, hello. Joel, yeah, thanks guys. I had an interesting day on X, formerly Twitter. It's amazing how you can quote Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, all the Sahih Hadiths, and suddenly Muslims are like, no, those are wrong. Those are completely wrong. And then they'll give you weak Hadiths because they are embarrassed. For instance, about the simple fact that Muhammad slept with a 9-year-old. And this is recorded in these authentic Hadiths. And these are considered canonical, and these are not considered false. Now, I'm not saying that we consider Islam true and correct and historically 100% accurate. However, the Islamic record certainly does make the claim that Aisha was 9. And of course, Muslims now suddenly start to deny this, and they start denying these Sahih Hadiths. So, yeah. And then I had someone turn to Grok, and Grok was, no, the record is definitely that she slept. Muhammad slept with a 9-year-old Aisha, and that any other revisionist claims are based on weak or otherwise revisionist, unsupported, unsubstantiated claims, which was glorious. But some people can't take the L. So yeah, that's where we are. But do let people know, and I think it's very important, that in Islam, Muhammad slept with a girl that was younger than Jeffrey Epstein's youngest victim. Epstein's youngest victim was 11 to 13, according to court records, allegedly, whereas we have, Aisha being 9. So, yeah, and I basically said that she was Epsteined. So do discuss that. I'll let people ponder that. So, yeah, today we're talking about, was Jesus a Palestinian? No, he was from Judea. He was Jewish. And there were no Palestinians in the first century. Now, I have discussed this at length in the past. I'll bring up those videos that anyone can go check. But I just want to take a slightly different perspective on this, because this is now becoming a common assertion, and it's a false assertion. It's obviously a lie. IC Crusader says that I would say that those who claim Jesus was Palestinian are equivalent to those who say that Hebrews are African. Yes, the black Hebrew Israelites. On that score, that's actually a very interesting point that you make there. Let me just go to, let me bring up something from X that I think will be relevant. I'm going to bring this up. I'm just going to screen grab this. And yeah, I installed Windows 11 yesterday. I know that Windows 10 is soon going to be defunct. But what I did was I installed Windows 11. And yeah, I'm not wild about it, but it's probably time. So notice here, as a South African, I'm saying here, oops, let me just see if I can zoom this in. So as a South African, I asked Grok what contributions the Xhosa, the Zulu have made to the world equivalent to those of the British or the Americans. Grok replied, it has no specific contributions to scientific theory or methodology. They have no documented advancements in medical practices or innovations. They contributed no notable developments in technology or engineering, and there are no notable inventions recorded from Nguni tribes like the Xhosa or the Zulu. This is because a couple of days ago, someone mentioned that on a stream that Americans stole the land from American Indians who did not own the land, did not have the concept of land ownership, and were themselves plundering and slaughtering and raping and slaving and so on other tribes, including eating them. And yeah, They have no postal codes. They had no contracts. They couldn't even read and write. They had nothing to indicate ownership, and only the chief would have ownership. So, and then I was given a whole bit of a straw man argument by someone. And the simple fact is, I said, okay, so what contributions have these tribes made to the world that we need to recognize? And of course, I did not get an answer. I got a whole bunch of waffle. But yeah, look, quite bluntly, these tribes have done zero, added nothing. And I think this is an indictment of their culture, an indictment of their thinking. So, yeah. Have you talked to Jay Smith yet? Eric Tyson says he believes Muhammad didn't exist at the time as the claims of the Quran or the city of Mecca. I mean, I dealt with Jay Smith in the past. I've done about a dozen shows with him, but quite honestly, he frustrated me greatly. His interest is not very much in the Sharia. He has his own ideas about what constitutes Islam, and then also he literally would, well, as I've explained in the past, about 15 times I was asked to be on standby to do a talk, and on 15 occasions he didn't show up. So I waited 45 minutes, an hour. I made sure I got home on time, etc., etc. And this happened repeatedly. And eventually I just thought it was incredibly disrespectful. And I said, look, I'm not going to do this anymore. I mean, I still follow his work. I listen to his talks, but personally, I'm not going to be told to be ready for a talk at 4 p.m. on Tuesday. And I get home at 10 to 4 and I rush in and I get ready, and then I sit there for an hour, and then he calls me the next day or contacts me the next day and says, oops, I forgot. And this happens 15 times in a row. I think, yeah, maybe I could do something else. So, okay. Chewing gum and maple syrup. Yes, those are probably benefits. So let's see, have I missed anything good? So welcome everyone. Let's dive into this one. This is an ancient map. I think it's from the 1400s. And actually I've discovered a cache of maps from like the 1500s and earlier and younger actually than that. And this one, notice here, it says Judea. And here you've got Galilee. And yeah, very interesting. Ephraim. You've got, I'm sure there's Jerusalem here somewhere. But Jerusalem right there. And yeah, but oddly enough, you'll find the other maps. I've discovered a whole bunch of these maps that would be worth going through in the future. Eric Tyson says, I apologize, didn't know about that. I understand your frustration. Yeah. Well, yeah, look, I mean, it's how it was. I made a decision. I just couldn't deal with it. You know, it was really, I mean, once, twice, every now and again, once a month, twice a month, it happens. But, and I'm not exaggerating. When it happens that often, I mean, look, man, this is disrespectful. You know, I mean, seriously, I couldn't deal with that. Not after like the 12th, 15th occasion. You're like, look, man, this is too much. Okay, now I was 2 minutes late because I just added this slide. So the word Israel actually appears about 77 times in the New Testament. Now the word Israel appears on various sources. Like if you go through my series here, which is the Palestinian occupation of Israel, and I also do a series with Usama Dakdok, Israel or Palestine. So if you look at any one of these, like especially this one, the Palestinian occupation of Israel, you'll find that Israel is attested going back to, I think, something like 3000 BC, or at least 2300 BC, so at least 3300, if not more years ago. It is attested as a legitimate nation. Palestine, of course, was created in 1964 by King Yasser Arafat I. So for anything that I'm not covering here, you're welcome to go through this particular series or this series, and a lot of that will be provided. All the details and facts will be provided there. Islamic origins. American Indians gave us how, and hey presto, we had the scientific, the power of a question. Mal is correct. Mal is correct. He's knocked it out of the park there. Yeah, well done. That's our dad joke for the day. It's a good one. It's a good one. Yeah. So anyway, the word Israel actually appears in the New Testament about 77 times. And of course, how often does the word Israel appear in the Quran? And the Jews are mentioned over 40 times. Palestine is mentioned exactly 0 times in the Quran. So, and it consistently refers to the ethnic or national Israel, which are the descendants of Jacob, whether historically as the nation of Israel It's people. Mel, if you'd like to hop in, if you want to come on, Mel, I will drop the link in the chat. Let me just do that now. So Mel, if you're keen, you're welcome to join me here. I'll just send you this by email as well, in case you want to jump in. Okay, so Mel, I've emailed you the link as well, in case you want to dive in. Okay, so now, so Israel is referred to in the New Testament, and this is whether it's historically as the nation, its people, or prophetically as a covenant community. So it is consistently referred to in the New Testament, and it does not get redefined as a synonym for the church. Now, I know there are various people making various claims. I'm not going to go into any depth on those, but it is not a synonym for the church in these contexts. In all instances, Israel denotes the people of God who trace their lineage to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, maintaining a very distinct ethnic and covenantal identity. So in Romans 9:6-9, Paul clarifies that not all who are physically descended from Israel are truly Israel in God's promise. And the true Israel includes those who share the faith of Abraham and Isaac, emphasizing the spiritual fulfillment. Of course, this is why Muslims want to claim that they are Abrahamic. Otherwise, they are outside of that lineage, which they are. And I don't think any of us accept that they are Abrahamic, because to them, Abraham teaches hatred of Jews and Christians, right? And so this emphasizes the spiritual fulfillment within the ethnic framework, but it doesn't substitute the church for Israel. So the Gentiles are grafted in to the tree. They don't replace the tree. So similarly, there are passages in Matthew 2:6 that refer prophetically to Israel as the people to whom Christ belongs as king, and the fulfillment of God's covenant promises. So the name Israel originates from Jacob, who was renamed Israel after wrestling with God, and that's going to be a relevant fact in the discussion around Palestine. Excellent, Mel. Great stuff. Your phone screen cracked up, huh, villainous? And yeah, so the name originates from Jacob. And this is important. We will be coming back to this point. And he formed this new nation, and the New Testament usage preserves this ethnic and covenantal significance, rather than extending Israel to mean exclusively the Christian church or a distinct spiritual entity separate from Jacob's descendants. Thus, throughout the New Testament, Israel remains tied to the covenant people of God descended from Jacob, rather than being redefined as the church, because Israel is a geography, it's a place, it's a country. Israelis are people. So, yeah. So these are different contexts that we're not here to address, though, but I want to bring this up. Now, Jew hatred is real. A little bit of context. So there's a lot of misinformation these days. We know that Jesus became a Palestinian. We know that Moses is a Muslim, and Abraham's a Muslim, Jacob's a Muslim, Joseph's a Muslim, everyone's a Muslim. I mean, the Beatles are Muslims. In fact, it's just how it goes, right? Queen Elizabeth I was a Muslim, Pharaoh was a Muslim. Take your pick. So misinformation about Jewish history and the connection to Israel is of the historical Jewish presence stems from long-standing anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and propaganda that does seek to delegitimize Jewish claims to the land. Hey, Mel, welcome.
Welcome. Very interesting topic.
Well, thank you. Much appreciated, man. Always good to see you. How's your book coming along, Mel?
Coming along in dribs and drabs. I've kind of I spent the last 2 weeks on just focused on one chapter alone. It takes a while, but yeah, I'm happy with it. It's coming together. Just the last couple of days, I've been finding so much new material. It's unbelievable.
I've been watching your shows.
Yeah,
I mean,
keeping some of it for the book, but
there's some good stuff you're putting out, Mel. It does start to change the perspective quite a lot. Do you want to tell the audience, because my channel has grown significantly the last 2 or 3 months, which has been great. Do you want to let the audience know a little bit about who you are, where they can find your material, and tell us also what the book will be about?
Yeah, so I'm Mel from Islamic origins. As you can probably tell from the channel name, I'm looking at the origins of Islam, and I don't accept the standard Islamic narrative about how Islam began, and I'm just looking at evidence, cold hard evidence for how it started, and I'm moving around the evidence, like evidence pushes me rather than me pushing the evidence. So I'm willing to go. I started off like most people thinking that the Hadiths are trustworthy, the Sirah is trustworthy, and all the rest of it. And then I first was exposed to some of the early sources about Muhammad, who seemed like a nice guy in these early sources. And then I started to question whether any of this was true. So I've come full circle.
And I think we all started off the same way. I mean,
Mm.
one of the things that got me going was when Jay Smith and Hatun Tash got on a ladder at Speaker's Corner, and she brought out 24 different Qurans, and my jaw dropped on the floor.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's not meant to be known, widely among the Muslim community. It's a well-kept secret, but that was only the beginning of so many other holes in the narrative. I suppose the big one that I'm seeing a lot over the past 48 hours is the fact that what I'm seeing of the Mahmed of history is that for the first few centuries, they never called him Muhammad, they called him Mahmed or Makhmet. Most commonly, the number one name was Makhmet with a T at the end.
That's very Ottoman in pronunciation.
It was what?
Very Ottoman the way that's pronounced.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and I think that might happen to be one of those coincidences. Actually, it came full circle. And the other thing is the fact that the people who started it off, who did the revolution, as it were, they were called Saracens and Tayyaye. And when you look at the historical sources, where did they live? They're nowhere near the Hijaz. So that's why you find that in the Islamic sources, you don't. I'm sorry, I'm taking you away from your topic.
Go ahead. No, look, I mean, we're discussing deception and falsehood, so I think this just adds to the topic.
Yeah. So what's interesting, if you look at the Sirah and the Hadiths, I'm not saying they don't exist at all because I haven't checked, but from my memory at least, I don't remember seeing too many references to Saracens or to Tayyaye in the Islamic sources. They've been pretty much scrubbed from the memory, and instead they mention the Quraysh. But when you go to the 7th century, you see no mention of the Quraysh, but you see the Saracens, the Tayyaye, they appear all over the shop. So obviously they changed the story, and the obvious answer to why did they change the story is because they need to move this guy down to the Hijaz. And if they keep the word Saracen or Tayyaye, the game is given away.
Yes, and on the old maps, the Saracens are up north, closer to Petra.
Exactly. So if you imagine a line from the western side of what were referred to then as the Black Mountains, which is in the Sinai Peninsula. I don't know what its current name. It's probably the Sinai Mountain Range. That was the traditional location of a place that I can't remember exactly how you pronounce it, but it was basically Saracen. We'll call it Saracen, the region. And then in the traditional place where the Midians lived, yes, very good, just along the left coast there of Sinai, that was where they lived. And then in the area
here, just the Gulf of Aqaba, around about the Gulf of Aqaba, very cool. Oh, sorry, what am I thinking? No, sorry, my bad. It's here. Aqaba.
Here, that's Aqaba. But actually, the western coast of that Sinai Peninsula, along there was actually the traditional region called Saracen. Okay, but they didn't. And then they basically moved to the area where the traditionally the Midianites lived.
Wait, this is Africa. Doesn't this then, because I remember in my monotheism series, I spoke about the very strong ties to Africa.
Well, yeah, that's certainly, yeah. Depends how you
historically define it. There are clear ties in terms of religious beliefs, practices, and historical migration. Wow. Okay, go on, please.
So then if you kind of move across into northwestern Arabia, southern Israel, there's an area where the Midianites used to live. That was the area
around Aqaba.
Yeah. So that area was, I'm trying to remember the source, Ptolemy in the 2nd century. He was basically saying that's where they were living at that time. And then if you go forward a few centuries, you see reference to them showing up on the banks of the river Euphrates, which is Iraq, which so happens to match up with the Tayaye. And
Very
so
interesting.
there's a very interesting description by a Roman source, and I've forgotten his name. It's a really long, complicated name, but he talks about their technique of raiding, it's like hit and run. They went around on horses at speed, and they would flee the scene afterwards. They'd rob and then they'd go.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no camels mentioned.
Wow.
And then the word Saracen itself, a very interesting finding was a writer mentioned that people often think it comes from descendant of Sarah or words to that effect,
Yeah.
or even the desolate of Sarah and things like that. But actually, it comes from Saraka in Arabic, which means plunderer, to steal. And it was a description of what they were doing. So they were living in the desert, and their livelihood was basically robbing from others. They didn't grow anything.
That actually ties into, there's a presentation I've not finished on the culture of the Arabs pre-Islamic.
Yeah.
And they were barbaric. They were violent.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
and you can understand, like, if you read the descriptions in the 7th century of how they were described, people say, there you go, that's proof they were Muslim because of their barbarity. But actually their barbarity goes back centuries, and they were godless in the sense that they didn't care about right or wrong. They were all about looting, and they would destroy churches, and they had no respect for anything.
Can you just pause a second? You've got B Moon. Just pause a second. The area has been referred to as Palestine. Palestine was actually referred to Israel. I'll be covering that because Palestine actually is the Greek name for Israel. So B Moon, before you speak, do check your facts very carefully. Now, I'm going to ask you a question about Palestine because obviously you seem like a very educated, smart person. Name me the first king, or the first 2 kings or 3 kings of Palestine. Because if there was a nation, a state, a people, then they would have had leaders of some type. Name me their religion. What was their holy book? What architecture did they build? What was their currency called? Do you have examples of their coins? What was their national produce? What language did they speak? So if you cannot answer those, that's because they're a fictional people. Palestine was a regional descriptor for Judea. It became formalized under the Romans after the Bar Kokhba revolt in 135-136 AD. So it was simply a regional descriptor of Judea, which is named after the Jews. There was no such people. They're a fiction. They never existed. You cannot prove, and nobody can prove, that Palestinians existed. As I said, they were invented in 1964 by King Yasser Arafat I. So,
of course, the Romans wanted to wipe their culture, their memory off the map as a response to that revolt in the 2nd century.
Yes, of course. So that's when it became formal. But prior to that, so we'll look at that. I wonder, so here's your answer, Villainous. Ethiopia is done here, but there was constant trade along this section. There was trade all the way up to Greece and Rome through here. And then I wonder, before we get too carried away, though, someone asked about this Mary Hobb thing. So do you want to give an update to anyone about that? About the existence of Muhammad and all that?
I suppose one of the negative things about debates is often they give you a position that people argue both sides of, which neither side actually exactly agree with. So my position is there was someone or a collection of people that was the inspiration for the beginnings of this thing that became Islam. But my argument is that the Islamic story is completely wrong.
Yeah.
And that it grew legs, and you can't trust the Hadiths, you can't trust the Sirah. And there's an element of truth in it, and that's as far as we can go. And if you go to the earliest descriptions, you see all the contradictions. The 7th century sources contradict the later story. And that's my position. Yeah. Maybe not presented very well. Sometimes I kind of get carried away and I go maybe a step to the point of saying, no, there was no Muhammad. But what I really mean is the Muhammad of the standard
there
Islamic
was
narrative.
Someone, or there was some ones that fit a certain archetype, but As for a singular Muhammad, I mean, the closest we have is, who's the guy from the 9th century now again? What was his name? The caliph and his general.
You don't mean the 7th century Abdul Malik and
Abdul Malik? Yes,
no,
right. Abdul Malik and his general. Yeah, those two are clearly very formative. But clearly, there were people that they modeled this on. I mean, it's a whole hodgepodge. It's a mix. It's a soup.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's jump onto. Yeah, well, shall we just jump back into this?
Yeah, do. Yeah. I don't want to take.
Because I mean, what you said was interesting, and I'm glad you're here. And people should learn about your channel as well. And do support his channel, right? Go over there, give him a like. Subscribe, share, same as you do. Make jihad on the like button. Make sure you beat it black and blue. So yeah, so there's been a lot of misinformation, as Mal just pointed out, and I think it's relevant to this story. And there's, of course, attempts to deny or distort the historical Jewish presence in the region, which is proved in archaeology. There is roughly zero archaeology to prove Islamic claims, and they're known for blowing up archaeology, which is insane. Okay,
just on that very thing, do you know that there was a recent story that they've analyzed an inscription in a cave? I can't remember. Was it in it's either Sinai Peninsula or in Egypt, and they reckon it was written by Moses. Do you know that one?
No, tell me again. Sorry.
They've been aware of this inscription for about 100 years, and recently they've done like 3D analysis of the inscription, and they've looked at the meaning of it, and there's a clear MS which they interpret as coming from Moses. So wow. This is like pretty good evidence that there was a Moses, and actually in the location they were rubbing out the pagan gods' names, so they were definitely anti-pagan. So if I remember where I saw the story, I'll send it on to you. But I think that, when you dig the surface with the Jewish story, you find historical evidence to back it up in a way that you don't find elsewhere. It's even Judaism make big claims, but it tends to be backed up by archaeological digs.
I follow biblical archaeology, and there is more and more evidence coming out on a routine basis that backs up and verifies more and more and more of the biblical story. Yeah. So this is becoming more and more true all the time. Thanks, Century Sense. You know what? Hold on. I'm going to address B Moon once. Now, B Moon, you're an idiot. You cannot answer. Okay, you keep coping. You cannot answer me. What was the currency of the Palestinians? What was the name of their third king? What was the name of their first king? Right? What was their religion? What was the name of their holy book? What gods did they worship? If you want to claim the Palestinians were a people and a nation, a state, then they have to have certain markers. Typically, a state will have a flag or a symbol. It'll have borders. It'll have a currency. It'll have leaders. It'll have a polity of some type. If you can let me know what fits these criteria for the Palestinians, then we'll know you're not lying. If you can't answer it, then you know that you are talking about a fake nation that never existed. Now, of course, he's saying Israel as a state has existed for 77 years. Now, hold on. Let's actually do something here. Let's actually do something as well. On that point, I'm gonna have to take a moment here. Hold on. I'm just going to wait for this to come up in a second. It's going to take a moment to run. Okay, so now this idiot is saying Israel has existed for 77 years. Now, of course, it was referred to as Palestine by the Greeks, who referred to it as Israel. Palestine actually meant Israel. We're going to show you that. But of course, there was no Palestine. There was no Palestinian people. Prove to me there was a Palestinian people. Answer my questions. Now, let's have a look at Muslim countries in existence after 1948. Okay, let's have a look. Pakistan, created after Israel. Indonesia, a Muslim state created after Israel. Libya, created after Israel. Sudan, that's 1951, 1956. Morocco, 1956. You know what that means? Indonesia, Libya, Sudan, Pakistan, Morocco, Tunisia, Malaysia, Somalia, Guinea, Senegal, Mali, Nigeria, Mauritania are all fake nations because they're less than 77 years old. They're much, much younger than Israel, which means these are fake countries. These are all fake countries that, you know what, they should all go back to, I don't know, Fakistan, wherever they come from. So yeah, these are all Muslim countries created after Israel. They're all fake. United Arab Emirates, you know what they need to do? They need to go back to Greenland or Iceland, wherever they come from. Your thoughts, Mel?
Well, actually, no better source to go to. You can go to the Quran and count how many times Palestine is mentioned there, and then count how many times Israel is counted.
Over 40 times. So yes, Israel is mentioned something like 44 times in the Quran. Allah is a Zionist. He gives Israel to the Jews, the children of Israel, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
and that would be a golden opportunity if there was a Palestine. Like it was still on maps called Palestine. From the Roman tradition, but even the Quran doesn't even acknowledge that.
Yeah. So notice this liar cannot provide any evidence that there was a Palestine, there was a people or a nation. None. I've asked him very basic questions. What's the name of their currency, their religion, their holy book? He never answered a single question. All they have is lies, and this is what they do. All of these countries here. Oh no, Palestine declared independent in 1988. Talk about a fake country. Kosovo, 2008. I think, good grief, we need to disband that. You know what? We need the one-state solution. We give the Middle East to Israel. Those are my thoughts. Okay, so moving on. Right. So now, anti-Semitic propaganda like this liar B. Moon that came on often claims a fabricated international Jewish conspiracy for world domination based on forged documents like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion from 1903, which obviously falsely allege a secret Jewish plot to control global politics, finance, media, foster wars, and so on, and so on, and so on. And of course, these theories all suggest that Jews have no historical or indigenous connection to the land of Israel, denying very well-documented archaeology going back 3,000 and 4,000 years. Right? Of course, there is no such evidence to support the existence of this Palestinian people. And I gave him a chance to give me that proof. He's here just to disrupt and deflect. And of course, then you get Holocaust denial or distortion. And you've just mentioned, Mal, that Muslims lie about their own origins. And those are also in question. So this is just more and more of the same. Your thoughts, Mal?
Well, what strikes me is denying someone's nationhood is in the same realm as genocide. In fact, I think that's the definition of it officially internationally. So to deny the Holocaust is part of that. To deny that the Jews had any historical link to Israel is part of that. So you see a similar thing today with Putin's war on Ukraine. He denies Ukraine is a real country. It doesn't have a constitution. They're really little. I think he calls them little Russians. That's the term he uses. They're not Ukrainians. They're little Russians. Same mentality. Same mentality. It's just a form of racism, I suppose. I know we kind of use the word anti-Semitism for this, but it's like any other racism. It's a form of racism where you deny people the most basic of human rights, which is the right to have an identity. I think we should be moving beyond this at this stage. The very people who deny Jews the right to have a nation would also deny them the right to live in other countries. So where are they meant to go?
Yeah. We've also got Bobby G being a fool. I mean, Jew hatred makes sense when you read Martin Luther, who institutionalized Jew hatred in Christianity. But okay, so moving on. Now, again, there's another issue, genetic continuity. This is not the platform here I'm looking to go into some length. I'm going to do one page on this, and then I'm going to dive into my talk. But you've got extensive and robust genetic research that consistently shows that Jewish populations worldwide share a significant and traceable common ancestry that originates in the Middle East, particularly the Levant, which is modern Israel, and within the last several thousand years. And this genetic continuity aligns with the historical records and the archaeological records of Jewish presence in the land of Israel, for which we have physical archaeological records going back thousands of years. What do we have for Mecca? Zero. Nothing. Nada. Now, genetic studies have shown that more than 70% of Jewish men share Y chromosome lineages very closely related to Middle Eastern Arabs. They always say, go back to Poland. Go back to Ukraine. Go back to, well, there was a diaspora, right? Everyone's always so happy to tell us the Jews were kicked out of X number of countries. But of course, these Jews still have genetic lineage directly to the Middle East. So there's a common paternal ancestor residing in the region thousands of years ago. And in fact, one study that I was reading, and there's several, I can actually bring up a bunch. I was looking at several. It seems that Jewish men have DNA that comes from 5 women. So they can tie them to just 5 women that come from the Middle East. They can tie them to just the DNA of just 5 women. Ashkenazis descend from Middle Eastern ancestors and later European admixture, because that's where they moved to. And their maternal lineage is traceable to Middle Eastern origin thousands of years ago. Okay. Bobby G, I have no idea what it is you are talking about. I have no idea. But look, I'm going to put you in timeout for 24 hours because you are being a distraction and you're talking cryptic nonsense. So now there are distinctive genetic markers like the Cohen modal haplotype found across Jewish groups. And this traces back to a shared paternal lineage consistent with Jewish priestly ancestry 3,000 years ago. So then also we have all the false DNA claims that ignore the convergence of a lot of independent genetic studies. People will deny facts. Again, I asked this guy, what was the currency of Palestine? What was their major export? What diplomatic records exist? Who were they mentioned by? What was their language? What was their religion? What was their holy book? What were their temples called? Where was their temple? None of those questions can be answered because they never existed. It's fiction. It's not possible to answer to fictions. So the assertion that Jews are not historically or genetically connected is scientifically unfounded. So, I mean, there's a ton of these. I'm just going to bring up one of these just to save time. But there is plenty. Sorry, oops. Just click on that. This is just one study from Stanford Medicine. And there's stuff from Harvard, and you can go through all of these places where there's loads of anti-Jewish marches and pro-Palestinian marches, but there are plenty of studies that confirm the DNA. Any comments, Mel, before I move on?
No, I'm familiar with this DNA study, and it's no surprise, So it's good evidence to use.
Okay, great. So without going into all as I said, I've got a bunch of links. I've got 6 of them linked down here on the bottom, and I found a bunch more. I just linked 6 of them for relevance. Maybe I'll just bring up number 2 for the heck of it. National Library of Medicine. Gene tests show that 2/5 of Ashkenazi Jews are descended from only 4 women. So yeah, and there's a whole bunch of these tests. So yeah. Okay, so let me close that. And let's go on. This is a map. Here's Arabia. Here's Judea. No mention of Fakestein, oddly enough. So there's plenty of these old maps. I found a resource with hundreds of these things, which is really, really interesting. Hundreds of old maps. So this is the kingdom of Herod. Notice the Nabatean kingdom. My, I thought that's supposed to be Palestine. It's the Nabatean kingdom. Good grief. And this area was ruled by Herod the Great from 37 BC to 4 AD. And he was a Roman installed king. So this was a Roman client state in the 1st century BC, and it encompassed Judea, Samaria, Galilee, Idumea, Perea, and also modern-day Israel, including what they now call Palestine, right, Jordan and southern Syria. But notice the map itself doesn't reference this. So this is Beersheba, right? You've got Jerusalem here. This is Jerusalem. You've got Jericho and Caesarea. So this was populated by Jews, Samaritans, Idumeans, Gentiles, and their major cities were Jerusalem, Caesarea, and Jericho. And here it doesn't talk about Palestinians. Well, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much an impossible case to try and build for a Palestine in ancient times. It just sounds like a fantasy idea. The name seems to have been a hostile label from the Romans. Now, maybe they borrowed it from the past. I'm sure you'll get to that. But yeah. Now, Herod's regime was very noted for its building program, notably the expansion of the Second Temple in Jerusalem. Now, why didn't he build the Palestinian temple?
I find it very odd that Herod built the second temple, not the Palestinian temple. He built a Jewish temple. If the Palestinians were the major religion at the time, don't you think he'd build the Palestinian, I don't know, Palestinian mosque?
Yeah.
So the term Palestinians was never used in the first century to describe a distinct ethnic or national group. You had Jews. They were the majority in Judea and Galilee. They practiced Judaism, and they were centered around Jerusalem and the Second Temple. That is here, Jerusalem and the Second Temple. You had Samaritans in Samaria with their own temple on Mount Gerizim, often in conflict with the Jews. You had Idumeans. They were descendants of the Edomites, forcibly converted to Judaism under the Hasmoneans, and that includes Herod's own family. And you had non-Jewish groups like the Greeks, the Syrians, and others in the coastal cities like Caesarea up here and Decapolis. So Jesus was Judean and definitely not Palestinian. And the question is why? Well, let's see. There was a time when the word Palestine meant Israel. So let's have a look. This is from the Biblical Archaeology Society, which collects all of this data. So the question of where Jesus was born and the terminology used to describe the location, whether Judea, Israel, or Palestine, demands a very careful examination of historical, biblical, and archaeological evidence. So the New Testament is the primary source for Jesus' life, and it places his birth, without doubt, in Bethlehem, within the region of Judea during the late Second Temple period. Okay, so now the Second Temple period runs from 516 BC to 70 AD. And it's odd that the Muslims had to build a mosque on top of the temple. You know, because I don't know how the mosque got on top of a temple that wasn't there. So we want to provide a definitive, historically accurate account of Jesus' birthplace and the geopolitical context of his time. And we want to look at this use of the term Palestine, the anachronistic use of the term. And we want to look at some alternative perspectives, including that of Palestine, which was a Greek pun on the name Israel. Now, everything I show here is grounded in verified historical data using primary sources, archaeological findings, and scholarly analysis. Any thoughts, Mel, before I go on?
No, I'm all ears.
So, the biblical account of Jesus' birthplace. There's only 26 slides or 27 slides, so it's not very long. The New Testament provides the earliest and most detailed account of Jesus' birth. The Gospel of Matthew states, now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king. So that's interesting, which means that we have a king, we have records, we have archaeological records, we have writings, we have documents, and Herod doesn't talk about Palestinians very much. He talks about it about as much as Allah talks about Palestinians in the Quran. So he's located in Bethlehem, a town in Roman Judea. Luke corroborates, saying that Joseph went up from Galilee, from Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David. Now they agree that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, Judea, during the reign of Herod the Great, a Roman clime king from 37 BC until his death around 4 BC. Or, sorry, AD. I could have made a typo there. So the dating of Jesus' birth is estimated to have been between 4 BC. I think it's correct then, based on Herod's reign and the reference to the Star of Bethlehem in Matthew, which some scholars associate with astronomical events like a planetary conjunction. Now, the Gospels do not give us an exact year, and discrepancies exist, like Luke's mention of a census under Quirinius, governor of Syria, from 6 AD complicates the timeline. Nevertheless, the consensus places Jesus' birth in the late years of Herod's rule, within the geopolitical region of Judea. Any comment before I continue?
Just that the Star of Bethlehem is a messianic symbol as well as an astronomical thing.
Okay.
You can make the name David from 2 triangles linked together. So it's there's a Hebrew word which means and, or a Hebrew letter which means and. I can't remember what is it lav or vav or something like that. So you have Dalet and Dalet.
Okay.
And if you turn them upside down, you have the Star of David. So it's very rich. So to be born under the star of Bethlehem, and of course David is born in Bethlehem. It's full of symbolism.
Right.
So it's basically saying, like, the whole thing is basically saying Jesus is the Messiah because he's born under the star of Bethlehem. That's like a big. It's like the bat sign in the sky saying,
Wow,
the Messiah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And Vilena says we need to use the Injil again for Muslims. A simple question, and I know you won't answer. I know you're going to dance around this, but do you have a copy of the Injil to show us? Do you have a fragment of the Injil? Is there a historian or some other document that refers, or a scholar that refers to the Injil or quotes from it? Do you have any records whatsoever? Jesus received a book called the Injil, was given a book. God the librarian sent down a book to Jesus. Is there any such book that you can refer to? What was written in it? Where is it? Is there any record of it? We have records of the entire Gospels. We can find it written and referred to and even quoted by various scholars. So there are millions of such records. What is there for the Injil? Nothing. So, okay, this is another map. And here you've got Terra Promisiona. I think this is from the 1400s. These maps are like from the 1400s, I think, larger than I'm referring to here. And it says Canaan. This was Canaan. This was never Palestine. This was Canaan long before. So, because we know from the Old Testament they were sent into Canaan, we know they were Canaanites. We know that the Palestinians occasionally claim they are Canaanites. Bigfoot is a Palestinian. You're right. He's also a Muslim. I think we're getting it now. Yeah. And they did try to invent an Injil with the Gospel of Barnabas. Yes, that was a fake attempt at a Muslim attempt to do so. I think yes. So hello, everyone. Welcome to all the new people in the chat. So this is Canaan. This is Simeon. This is Dan. This is Ephraim. And fascinating, but I'm missing. This is Judea. Here it says Judea or Judah for Judah. So here we've got, and we're missing this little Palestine part. It's not exactly, So some Judea, 1st century BC. At the time of Jesus' birth, the region encompassing Judea, Galilee, and Samaria was under Roman control. The Romans, we still have extensive records and we have extensive knowledge of the Romans. Did they ever mention Palestine as a race, nation, people they subjugated? Nothing. Crazy. They talk about the Jews a whole lot, though.
Yeah.
Right. So they administered these regions through a combination of client kings and direct governance with people like, say, Pontius Pilate, who was an overseer. So Judea, where Bethlehem was located, was a Roman client kingdom under Herod the Great, appointed by the Roman Senate in 40 BC. So he was king over Judea. Why wasn't he king over Palestine? And his rule extended over Judea, Galilee, Samaria, parts of Idumea and Perea, though his authority was subject to Roman oversight. After his death, the kingdom was divided amongst his sons. Judea came under direct Roman rule by 6 AD, governed by prefects like Pontius the Pilate, right, who was there from 26 to 36 AD. Now the Galilee. This is where Jesus later resided in Nazareth, and this was a separate region ruled by Herod Antipas, Herod's son, and he was the tetrarch. And the distinction between Judea and Galilee is significant in the New Testament, as Jesus is often identified as Galilean, Matthew 26:69, but his birthplace is consistently placed in Judea. Odd, not in Palestine. It's interesting, Vilnius makes a very good point here. Don't forget the Injil has to be written in Arabic, because that's all that Alan can understand. Yeah, checkmate. Is there evidence for Arabic from the 1st century BC or the 1st century? Because Arabic is not that old a language. Mel, any thoughts?
I'm just curious where you're going. I'm dying to see where we have the first occurrence of Palestine and that.
Yeah, I'll get to those.
To a pun on the word as well. I'm looking forward to seeing that bit.
Okay, yeah. So the term Israel in the period referred to the Jewish people as an established religious and ethnic group, a known entity. The northern kingdom of Israel had Samaria and parts of Galilee, and this was conquered by the Assyrians in 722 BC, and it ceased to exist. So you had southern kingdom of Israel, effectively Judea. Now the southern kingdom of Judah, centered in Judea, persisted until the Babylonian conquest in 586 BC. after which it became a province under Babylonian, Persian, and later Hellenistic or Greek rule. After the Babylonian exile, the area was known as Yahud under Persian rule. That's from 539 to 332 BC, and then derived from the Hebrew Yehuda or Judah. Even Muslims today in Arabic say Yahud for the Jews.
Yeah.
Then you had Alexander the Great's conquest in 332 BC, and the region came under Hellenistic influence under the Ptolemies of Egypt and later the Seleucids of Syria. Then the Hasmonean dynasty, established after the Maccabean revolt, 167 to 160 BC, restored Jewish independence for a while and ruling Judea and the surroundings until the Roman intervention in 63 BC. I'm missing those Palestinians. By Jesus' time, Judea was very firmly under Roman control, either through Herod or Roman prefects, and was known as Judea in Latin and Greek texts. So we have a huge amount of information and evidence, direct evidence, proving Judah, Judea, Jews present in the region. They are there. There's a language, there's a people, there's religion, there's architecture, there's culture, there's religion. And then you've got a couple of mentions of Palestine, and somehow that overrides all of the other evidence. We have no evidence of a Palestinian people, Palestinian state, Palestinian language, Palestinian religion, Palestinian anything. So anything else, comments before I go on?
Yeah, there's no evidence for Palestine that I can see. Yeah, this is all, familiar material. So,
Yeah, Pontius was an F-35 pilot. I mean, yeah, he was responsible for the flight out of Egypt. So, yeah, so the Hellenistic period refers to the era in ancient history that spans from the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC to the conquest of the Eastern Mediterranean and Asia Minor by the Roman Republic in 31 BC. And this is characterized by the spread of Greek culture across a vast area, including the Eastern Med and the Middle East, which is why the earliest Old Testament that we have, the Septuagint, is written in Greek. So there was this proliferation of Greek. It was the lingua franca of the region. Everyone spoke Greek. So the absence of Palestine in Jesus' time. So the term Palestine did not denote an official political or administrative region during Jesus' lifetime. Now, its origins are debated, but the popular view links it to the Hebrew Peleshet, referring to the land of the Philistines, a coastal region south of modern Tel Aviv, encompassing the cities of Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. Now, the Philistines are a non-Semitic people originating from the Aegean, possibly Crete or Cyprus. I think they've been tied effectively to Crete, but also from the south of Spain, from the Iberian Peninsula, from the very south of the Iberian Peninsula. So, and they arrived in the region around the 13th century BC, as attested by Egyptian inscriptions, identifying them as Pereset, one of the sea peoples. So the material culture includes Mycenaean-style pottery, which is effectively Greek pottery, and this confirms a distinct identity. They're not from the region. So by the late 7th century BC, after Nebuchadnezzar's invasion, the Philistines disappeared from the historical and genetic record, and they were assimilated into surrounding populations. Recently, and I've covered this on the previous shows, I mentioned those in the beginning, things you can look up. The DNA has been found, graves have been found, which have then tied them now to Crete and to Spain. So they're largely from Greece, Macedonia, Crete, and so on, but they're definitely not Semitic. They're not Jews, they're not Arabs, they are from Europe, as we know it today. Here's another map, another interesting map, and oh my golly, look down here. It says Amalekites. Now that's an interesting thought. This is where Palestine's supposed to be, and it says Amalekites. Now, we do know from the Old Testament that the Amalekites were given a great deal of time, 400 plus years, to get their act together. And eventually they were told, the Jews were told by God that they need to go and wipe them out. But it does also say that they will be the enemies of the Jews for all time. Now, if these Amalekites here are in the location where the Palestinians are today, then that does tie in with the Old Testament statement that these Amalekites will be the enemies of the Jews forever. Your thoughts before I go on? No.
Nothing at the minute. I'm just trying to see where you're going.
Okay. So, Goliath was supposed to be Palestinian, although, in fact, there's been discovered, there's lots of interesting things being discovered, like certain mistranslations in the Bible. Now, of course, I want to be careful and I don't want to get into conspiracy territory, but it's recently been discovered, and there's still a lot of research going on with the Bible, and this is research that I looked at that seemed very credible. It wasn't sort of conspiracy style stuff or, oh my God, look, we found that Jesus was an alien from the planet Krypton. Right, not that kind, but they stated that there was an error attributing Goliath's height to being 9 feet. It seems that there was some sort of transcription error somewhere by a scribe along the way, and he was closer to like 6.5 to maybe 7 feet. So he wasn't a 9 foot or 10 foot giant. It seems he was closer to 6.5, 7 feet. So interesting, something I came across recently. But this Amalekites reference in this map to me was just really interesting. It was just really, so if that's the Amalekites, then of course they're enemies of the Jews. So let's continue. So Herodotus and Palestine. Now, what was interesting was that this guy, B Moon or B Cool or B Stupid, whatever his name was, he actually used the term Palestine. In the 5th century BC, the Greek historian Herodotus used the term Palestine to describe a broad region between Phoenicia and Egypt, encompassing not only the Philistine coast, but the interior, including parts of Judea and the Jordan Valley. Now, this is interesting. You're talking Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. That is a huge area. Right, Mel? You'd agree. I mean, that's a large area.
That's a big area. So that's not a nation then. It's a transnational area, would you say?
Correct. Now, if these Palestinians were the people who'd settled this entire region and were the primary population, they were a state, a nation, don't you think we'd get some kind of record somewhere between Egypt, Jordan, and Syria of their existence?
You would think.
Yeah, one would think, but we have exactly zero. We're collecting Easter eggs in July here. This is how much evidence we have for these Palestinians across this entire region, from Syria all the way down to Egypt, all the way down to Jordan. Interesting.
Like, I would say that a term like that would be useful when you're discussing a wide area. Like today we use the term Fertile Crescent, and
Yes.
what we mean by that whole area. It's a
Yes.
sweeping title, but it doesn't mean anything more than that's just a handy shorthand way of describing an area of land that's of interest. Like, you could easily describe it as everyone that's living on the eastern end of the Mediterranean, for example. But
yeah, I want to say, who are the Fertile Crescent people? Exactly. Thank you, Mel. That's a really apt example. Yeah, it's like Palestine, Fertile Crescent. It's a geographical descriptor. It's not a reference to a nation. It's not a reference to a state. It's simply that. So here you've got a very large area that we have no records for, literally nothing. So let's look at apparently. So Herodotus notes that the inhabitants of Palestine were circumcised. Oh, that's odd, because he was writing about Jews living there. So this aligns with Jewish practices, but not those of the uncircumcised pork-eating Philistines, because the Philistines ate pork. And he writes about this in his History, volume 2, and in 1 Samuel 17. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? It's interesting that Herodotus also, in his notes, refers to an uncircumcised, he refers to an uncircumcised people, but he also refers to that the inhabitants of Palestine are circumcised, meaning they are Jews. Somehow people forget to go into Herodotus' writings and point that out. So Herodotus applied Palestine to the broader region inhabited by Jews, effectively the land of Israel, because the Jews were the predominant people of the region. Interestingly enough, Aristotle in the 4th century BC described the Dead Sea as being in Palestine as well, despite its location in Judea, far from the Philistine coast. Okay, so what you've got is you've got an area where the Philistines were known to have been. They never ventured very far. They never got very far, and they had died out hundreds of years prior. So Aristotle said the Dead Sea was in Palestine as well, which is known to be inhabited by the Jews. There is no record of Palestinians in that region ever. Uncircumcised foreigners collecting pig bones. Yeah, something like that. Thank you very much. Alex Jevayan Jr., he's very right about his search. The birth of the Lord Jesus in Bethlehem is not Palestinian land. The Muslims came 632 years after the birth of Christianity. Yes. Yeah, here's another good point by Anush Newman. It's like the term Mesopotamia to describe a large area, or Scandinavia.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Yeah, you guys are getting it. So I appreciate that. I have the smartest audience, Mal.
Oh yeah. Oh well, I think my audience are on a par. They're pretty
close. Yeah, I mean, I think we have overlapping audiences. I think that's why they're so smart.
So. Yeah.
We share the same audience. L. Ron Hubbard did say the real way to make money was to create a religion. Then he created Scientology. Yes, that's true. So let's continue. Now, these references indicate that Palestine was an informal geographic term in Greek usage. It was not a precise administrative designation. And if anyone can prove to me it was a precise administrative designation that encompassed a nation, a state, a people, then again, I need to get those markers that indicate a state. If you have a state, you're going to have to have a symbol, a flag, a leader, a political structure. You're going to need borders. You're going to need currency. You're going to need your own language, your own architecture, your own. Who were your artists? Who were your artisans? Who was your famous chef? Things like that. There's no evidence for that. Yeah?
But this is an external name. So at that time, the people are not calling their own area Palestine.
No.
It's the Greeks calling them. It's a bit like the English calling Germany, Germany. The Germans never called it Germany. It's Deutschland.
You know what? Mal, I'm going to have to give you kudos there, because that is a brilliant statement. It was outsiders calling it that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, with the exception, you did mention that the Jews referred to, I can't remember the exact way you put it, but Palestine in terms of the Philistines. Did I get that right?
Say again, sorry, in what sense?
Was there, in one of the lines in your slides, there was a Jewish reference to Palestine, but it was
Palestine
specifically to the Philistines. It was their way of putting the word Philistine.
Right? That was Herodotus. Herodotus speaking of Palestine, which referred to, so Palestine referred to the region from Syria all the way down to Egypt and then south down to Jordan. And he said that the people who lived there were circumcised, meaning the Jews.
Okay, so
there were also these other peoples that he mentions, and they're the uncircumcised people, meaning the Philistines, the uncircumcised ones, which were not Jews.
Okay, so that's Herodotus. Probably mispronounced him, but he's Greek, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it isn't a word that's coming from the Jews. It's a Greek term.
Yeah, it's an imposed term. It's an external term imposed by foreigners who don't live there. Yes.
Yeah.
And just like the Romans used it, it's an external. And that's a valid point, Mel. I'm surprised I never thought of that. That's so obvious. It's an external name by a foreign culture that's, instead of using that, maybe they couldn't speak Hebrew, so they just use the term that's comfortable in their language.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like even in English, we'll say, like you said, the example you gave, Germany, because we don't know how to speak German.
Yeah.
So people don't know how to say Deutschland. So they'll simply say, Germany.
Actually, here's one, and I actually don't even know the answer to this question, but I'll put it out there. For anyone in the audience, can you tell me what Japanese people call their own country? And the answer isn't Japan.
I'll bet I probably couldn't pronounce it.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Thanks, Mel, but really brilliant. Yeah. Thank you for that.
No problem.
So let's have a look at Syria Palestina, because the area was generally called Syria Palestina. It wasn't called Palestine. But now these are two different terms, actually, Palestine and Palestine. Actually, we'll have a look at that. So Roman and Jewish writers in the 1st century AD continued this broader usage. So Philo of Alexandria, a Jewish philosopher, referred to Palestinian Syria, or as commonly termed today, Syria Palestina, as a region heavily populated by Jews, on Abraham 133 and on the life of Moses, chapter 1, section 163. Josephus, the Jewish historian, primarily used Palestinoi to denote the Philistines, but occasionally applied Palestine to the wider geographical region, including Judea and beyond. not to refer to a people, but a geographic region, Antiquities 1 and Antiquities 20. The Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible from the third, created between the 3rd and 2nd century BC, notably avoids the term Palestine to describe Paleshet, or the land of the Philistines. It doesn't use Palestine, the Greek, to describe the land of the Philistines, the Paleshet, the Plishtim. Instead, it uses Philisteim for the people, and then Geton Philisteim for their land. It has a separate term for the people and the land. So Palestine was not a direct transliteration of Paleshet. It has a different usage for Palestine. The official Roman designation, Syria Palestina, emerged only after the Bar Kokhba revolt in 132 to 135 AD, when the Emperor Hadrian renamed the province of Judea to sever its association with the Jewish people. He knew that these Philistines were the enemies of the Jews, and he renamed the land after them as an insult. But then also, people forget, he renamed Jerusalem. He renamed Jerusalem to Aeolia Capitolina, which is one of the names of the god Jupiter, because the Romans worshipped the god Jupiter. So these were Muslims. I'm not sure why they were having Jerusalem renamed to Jupiter. Doesn't make sense. But your thoughts on that, Mel?
My thoughts were in a different direction. People who want to insist that Israel needs to be liberated for the Palestinians would have to make the same argument for the Syrians. They need to give their land over to the Palestinians, because that was called Palestine as much as the rest of it. Yeah, another
Brilliant.
argument.
That's a brilliant observation, Mel. 2 minds are better than 1. Rather, 1.5 minds is better than a half mind. You know. The villain says Japan is Nihon Koku or Nippon Kok.
Nippon Kok. Right.
Yeah, Nihon Koku. Yeah, so why aren't we using the Japanese term? Because the indigenous term was not Palestine. That's an externally imposed term. That's a brilliant argument, Mel. Thank you for that.
Nippon Kok. There, I'll have to try and remember that one. It's a hard one to remember.
And Germany was called Almania by the Romans after a Roman general. Yeah, which is obviously not what the Germans themselves called themselves. So same problem.
Alaman. Where does
French?
Allemand. The French call it Allemand. Yeah. Well, that's where they got it.
Isn't that interesting? Thank you, Anush Newman. That's very helpful. So yeah, these are externally imposed terms. These are not the local indigenous terms based on the indigenous language, which is this is fascinating, Mel. This is great having you on.
Yeah, no, very good. No.
So the first mention of Philistines was in ancient Egypt when they tried invading Egyptian-controlled land, and they called them the Philistines, meaning invaders. Yeah, the Plishtim, the Hebrew Plishtim. Yes.
Ooh, wow. Here's a little parallel, right? That term Philistine is actually very similar to Saracens, because Saracen means plunderer and Philistine means invader. It's a name based on their function. You know
yes. Yeah, actually, let me bring this up. I should have it here. Let me just bring this up.
And the Philistines were in the same places that the Saracens traditionally were, which is in Sinai, if I remember you correctly.
I'll actually bring this up to see if I have it here. So this is just a quick from my previous talk. So the Philistines were seafaring people from Crete, the largest of the Greek islands, and the Philistines got their name from the Hebrew word plishtim, which means invaders. Palestine means, in this term, invaded land. And then you got the Saracens, who are the, what do you call them? The plunderers.
Yeah.
Pirates.
Very similar. Yeah. Very similar. Not exactly the same, but similar.
Similar, yeah. Oops, what have I done here? Okay, let's continue. So Hadrian also rebuilt Jerusalem as Aelia Capitolina, a Roman city named after the god Jupiter, which is fascinating. You'd think he'd be naming it, I don't know, Allahburg or Alavo, because the Palestinians were Muslims, right? So this renaming, over a century after Jesus' death, formalized Palestina as an administrative term, which encompassed Judea, Samaria, Galilee, and parts of the neighboring regions. So during Jesus' lifetime, the region was officially Judea, and Palestine was at most an informal Greek term for a broad area. It wasn't a distinct political entity. Now, Palestine is a pun on Israel. That's the section you were hoping for.
Yeah.
Interesting. Ave Maria says Almania is how we say Germany in Arabic too. Isn't that fascinating? So it's actually Romans. It's actually Romans are the original Greeks because it's Almania something. Fascinating stuff. Oh, this is really good. Okay, so an alternative etymology. So David Jacobson wrote a paper that's I'm only pointing to this particular location because it's easy to find there in Biblical Archaeology Review. Of course, it's published in other locations as well. He argues that Palestine may have originated as a Greek pun on the Hebrew Yisrael, rooted in the biblical account of Jacob wrestling with an angel from Genesis 32, 24 to 28. So Jacobson says that the Greek Palestes, or wrestler,
that is brilliant. I totally get that one. That is deadly.
Tell us more, Mel, because I know you've looked at puns before, plays on words with the.
Yeah, I love this sort of stuff. Yeah. This makes I'm totally bought on this etymology. Yeah.
Super. And Yomi says in Spanish, you say Alemania for Germany. So fantastic. Yeah. Thank you, guys. Again, I have the smartest audience. Me and Mel. Mel and I have the smartest audiences, and I'm very privileged to be sitting here with Mel. I used to watch Mel, I used to go, this guy's so smart, amazing stuff he's doing on YouTube. So Jacob says that Palestes, from the Greek word Palestes, or wrestler, resembles Palestine, and the verb epelein, he wrestled, appears in the Septuagint's account of Jacob's struggle. It's in the Septuagint, right? In Genesis 32, 24. Epelein, Palestine, okay? So you get this whole pal. So then Yisrael, meaning he who wrestles with God, could have inspired the Greek writers to equate the land of Israel with Palestine, leveraging the phonetic similarity to Palestes.
Yeah, I totally think that's what it is. So the words are alternative. Actually, if you go, I remember seeing a coin. I think it was from 1947. It's the 1940s, and it's basically says Israel and Palestine on the same coin. I think one was in Arabic and one was in Hebrew lettering. Wow. I thought, oh, that's fascinating. But that was back in the days when they were still okay with using each other's terms.
Yeah, I remember I showed this here when, let me find it, bugger. I showed it earlier when Israel meant Palestine, right? When Palestine, meant Israel, when Palestine meant Israel. So yeah, I mentioned that earlier. I'll actually, you know what, I'll bring it up. Actually, let me just bring this up right now. Biblical Archaeology Society. When Palestine meant Israel. Let me just bring up the article so that everyone can see it.
I'm sure there are loads of examples of puns in the Bible that we're unaware of.
Just so you know, it's a real article, and you can get the PDF here by clicking on that link. And it's a great article. It's really, I've read it many times. I cannot remember all of the details. Just so that you know, it has the cities where these guys, they invaded up to here, but they settled here in Gaza, oddly enough. That's as far as they got. But they died out 700 BC. They're gone from the historical record. They wiped out. The DNA is gone. These people, there's almost nothing left. But we can confirm they're from Europe. Yeah. So now this hypothesis is supported by the Greek love for wordplay. I mean, these people were playwrights. They were very much in love with words, with myth, with plays, with stuff like that. I mean, poetry. They were well known for writing, literature and such. And this is evident in literature. For instance, you have Aristophanes' puns in the birds, and there's coinage like Melos apple imagery. Don't ask me what that is. I looked it up. I have no idea. I don't want to spend the next hour discussing this, but this is supported in history. This is a well-known factor in Greek writing. Yeah.
And I would say that the Jews picked up on that wordplay and brought it to the next level, in terms of the writing of the Old Testament and even into the New Testament. I'm sure.
Yeah, because it's written, the Septuagint's written in Greek. That was the major language of the region. I mean, Hebrew is no longer a spoken language. It wasn't a liturgical language, but not in use. Eric Tyson says, when your name matches your profession or what one is known for is called an aptronym. These are very significant in both biblical and mythological history. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to be Jewish to be Palestinian. Yeah. And then, yeah, ironic they were called invaders. Seems they were successful over time. This is what they have in mind for, yeah, we know exactly how bad this is all getting. It'll turn around. So now the resemblance between Palestine and Paleshet, or the Philistines, allowed a double meaning, linking the Jewish people, descendants of the wrestler Jacob, with the coastal region historically associated with the Philistines.
Yeah.
Now, let's look at the Septuagint. So Jacobson argues that this pun predates Hadrian's renaming of Israel, or Judea, to Palestine, and of course Jerusalem to Aelia Capitolina, as evidenced by Herodotus, Aristotle, Philo, and Josephus, who all use the term Palestine to describe the land of Israel, not just the Philistine coast. Notice how Muslim Dawagandists always just say, hey, but Herodotus called it Palestine, and they don't give you further detail as to what he said about it. He doesn't mention that, hey, the people, the Palestinians, have purple noses and blue hair, and they have rings in their noses. He doesn't say that. He says the Jews live in Palestine. It's a geographical region encompassing Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. So, yeah. So Palestine described the land of Israel, not just the Philistine coast. The Philistines occupied at that time, we're talking hundreds of years prior, a very tiny stretch of the coast. So Hadrian's choice of Syria Palestina may have used an existing term, adapting it to encompass the broader region rather than solely erasing Jewish identity. So he used an existing term. Now this challenges the traditional view that Palestine derives solely from the Philistines, or the Paleshet, which is the name that the Egyptians gave to invading foreigners from Europe. These aren't foreigners from Jerusalem who were invading. These are foreigners from Crete and the Iberian Peninsula. So now the Septuagint avoids Palestine for Paleshet. It opts instead for Philisteum. So this supports the idea that Palestine had a distinct connotation tied to Israel, because it doesn't tie Palestine to the Philistines. It has a totally different term for the Philistines, but it ties this term to the region known as Israel, because of course the Septuagint is going to talk about Israel. Any thoughts, Mel?
No.
Yomi, the angel that wrestled with Jacob was actually Satan. Satan is the guardian angel of Esau, is the progenitor of the Amalekites. How about we don't talk about that now? Because first of all, I think you're clearly, misguided, and this is irrelevant to the topic right now. So I'm really not interested in weird foreign private interpretations. If you want to be helpful, let us know what church you belong to that actually endorses this theology. Because if you're just the Lone Ranger, then you're just making up something that only you privately believe, which is irrelevant for the rest of the world. But if you can tell us what authority that stands on, as opposed to the voices in your head, that would be great. Let us know what church you belong to so we can go look up their doctrine and theology, if you don't mind. So Ower says, hi, Mal and Lloyd. I seem to have still caught you live. Good evening and God bless to you and everyone in the chat. Thank you. Okay, Eric Tyson says, anagrams, aptronyms, vowel swapping, and even gematria are all systems which we would call today language arts. Look back at history's Antichrist figures. They all have their own narratives. Yeah. Okay, so let's continue. So archaeological evidence of Greek-Jewish contact, such as Greek pottery in Judea from the 7th century BC. Oops, typo. Typo. I do that a lot. So you've got Greek pottery in Judea from the 7th century BC. Shows the Greeks were around taking their name for the area. Instead of using the Jewish name, they were using their name, and they were there. And there's also Hebrew ostraka referencing Greek mercenaries. Kittim and Arad suggest that the Greeks were familiar with Jewish traditions, including the story of Jacob by the 6th century BC. So the Greek knowledge of the region, because they were settled in the region, goes way back. So as you said, it's a Greek name. It's not the local name. Now, wrestling is a very popular Greek sport, and you'll see this all over Jewish pottery, Greek pottery, my bad. And this would have resonated with this narrative, reinforcing the pun. Yeah, you're nodding along, Mel. I'm quite happy because if you're going along with it, that means I'm doing good.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. I have nothing to add to it at the minute, but sure will at some point.
Yeah, Player Feint actually adds something. Says DNA research confirms the origins of Philistines from Greek and South Italy as well. Okay, great. Yeah, and also the Iberian Peninsula, like Spain. Interesting. Okay, continuing. So we're nearly done. It's about 10 slides to go, maybe less. Herodotus. Now, this is when Palestine meant Israel, and this is from the article. I'll read a little bit of it. So there's evidence, both philological and geographical, that questions this traditional attribution of the name Palestine, right? So let us first consider the geographical problem. The Greek Palestine and Latin Palestina appear frequently in ancient literature, but they refer to not to the land of Philistines, but they always refer to Israel. They refer to Jews, the circumcised people, because the Philistines were uncircumcised. And of course, the Philistines, the Plishtim, arrived on the eastern coast of the Med from Greece or Cyprus by way of Egypt at the end of the late Bronze Age. So then it just so anyway, we've got that. So you guys are welcome to look up this article, When Palestine Meant Israel. Please look it up, When Palestine Meant Israel, and it'll be a great read. Now you've got Jerry Lee Oswald. Jesus wasn't even mentioned by one single historian of the time, and neither was a Palestinian people. So thank you. Look, you know what? I'm going to be kind. I'm going to. Is that even an accurate statement? Besides, of course, that's an assumption that the New Testament, the Old Testament, and so on are not actual historical records. In fact, the Bible is the most historically attested book in history. Right, so it is the most well attested, and you've got writings from Josephus, and you've got writings from various others that I think Pliny, that the younger, that all discuss Jesus. But yeah, certainly we're supposed to believe that that Palestine's a real place. Again, if someone can identify those markers that verify it as an actual country or people, that'll be great. But that's not possible because it's fiction. It's not even good fiction. So Jerry Lee, I've timed you out, but thank you very much. So yeah, if you can corroborate the existence of Palestine, that'll be great. Come back to us another day. So as early as the histories of Herodotus, written in the second half of the 5th century BC, the term Palestine is used to describe not just the geographical area where the Philistines lived, but the entire area between Phoenicia and Egypt. In other words, the land of Israel, right? And I'll give you a moment, Mel, in a moment. So Herodotus had traveled through the area. He'd visited. He had first-hand knowledge of the land and its people, and he used Palestine referred to not the Philistines, but the land of Israel, the people who were circumcised who lived there, as he referred to them. His understanding of the geographical extent of Palestine is reflected in his references to the population who are circumcised. And the Philistines he referred to as the uncircumcised people, and the Israelites were circumcised. And he knew about the Jewish people and their history because he mentions the destruction of Sennacherib's army by an act of God. And this can only be the same natural disaster that relieved Jerusalem of the Assyrian siege in the late 8th century BC, which is referencing 2 Kings 19. Mal, your thoughts before I continue?
I'm not too sure if I'm following this. So you're saying Herodotus is describing the geographical area as including all these areas. And yes, he seems to be using it to refer to the land of Israel.
So he writes that the people who live in Palestine are the circumcised Jews. And he says there are these other peoples. He mentions some other peoples. And he also gives reference to another group that are enemies of the Jews. And these are the uncircumcised people that he speaks of. So he mentions there are these other pockets of people in this region. But he says the land belongs to the circumcised Jews. So he says that's how we distinguish them.
Okay. So he's using the terms in different ways. So he's using it on the one hand, he's using the term to cover quite a large area. And then it seems like a contradiction because he's saying, on one hand, it covers Syria and Israel, blah, 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 blah. And then on the other hand, he's saying the occupants of Palestine are the circumcised That can't be historically accurate. I say that because is there a chance that Herodotus, he's a Greek writer, has he got a bias towards Judaism? Is he Jewish in some way?
No, I don't think so.
No.
Don't think so. I just checked this out on AI about that Jesus is not mentioned by early first century writers. So it says no, there are no detailed contemporary accounts of Jesus from historians. Of course, it's in the Old Testament, or sorry, in the New Testament, which is considered, I mean, if you judge it by the same criteria as any historical document, those are genuine and legitimate historical documents. It says a few non-Christian sources from the late first to early second century do mention him. Roman historian Tacitus refers to Jesus in his Annals, about 116 AD, and describes his execution under Pontius Pilate. Jewish historian Josephus mentions him in Antiquities of the Jews in 93-94 AD. Some passages apparently may be debated for authenticity, and these references are brief and post-date Jesus' life. I mean, but then again, nobody questions the existence of Alexander the Great. And the earliest reference to Alexander the Great comes, 500 years after his death? And there are only a handful of sources, where we've got dozens of sources that speak about Jesus. So the claim is misleading. Jesus is mentioned by historians like Tacitus and Josephus, though not by contemporaries. Okay. Did you want to say anything else here before I go on? No?
No, I'm a little. I have to say now, having looked at it again, I'm a little bit confused. So this is where, and I don't know, it could be tiredness. I don't know if I'm missing something, but if I understand you correctly, on the one hand, Herodotus is saying that Palestine, covers this vast area, and then he says the occupants of this land are circumcised, but that can't historically be accurate, because there were people in Syria that weren't Jews. It wasn't, even if the majority.
No, there were people that weren't circumcised, but he speaks of the people in, I think he's referring in that area around Jerusalem, the people in Israel. He refers to them as circumcised. And he speaks of other people, but he certainly refers to the Jews. He certainly refers to the Jews. He speaks of other people and he speaks of enemies.
So he's not saying the only people in this place that he calls Palestine are the circumcised.
No, but I'm specifically saying he mentions the Jews as circumcised and he mentions the Palestinians as uncircumcised. And he doesn't call them the inhabitants of the land. He calls them invaders. He calls them outsiders. He calls them enemies. Santa Frog says this is an apologist channel defending the indefensible. I mean, and that's a stupid comment. Meaning what exactly? So, yeah. Anyway, moving on. So the Philistines. So let's finish off. We got like the last 8 slides. So the Philistines' origins. So the origins and arrival. They were seafaring people. They were part of the sea peoples who invaded the Eastern Mediterranean in the late Bronze Age. Collapsed around 1200 to 1175 BC. And archaeological evidence, like the Greek-style pottery and architecture from sites like Ashdod, Ashkelon, and Ekron, suggests they originated from the Aegean, possibly areas like Crete, Cyprus, or mainland Greece. Ancient DNA analysis from Philistine burials in Ashkelon reveals a significant influx of Southern European genetic ancestry. I cover this in much more depth in my other talk that I mentioned earlier, right? So this is in the early Iron Age, which diminished over time as they intermixed with local Levantine populations. So Egyptian records, so they died out about 700 BC. They were gone from the record. So yes. Now, Egyptian records from the reign of Ramesses III, right, roughly 1186 to 1155 BC, depict them as the Paliset, or as the Egyptians called them, the Periset, one of sea people groups, several of them defeated in battles, which means they were invaders, which means they didn't own the land. They were outsiders. They were known. They are recorded in historical archives by archaeology, and the Egyptians recorded this very extensively. We have extensive archaeological records from Egypt. These are outside invaders. They are not from the region. So therefore, there is no way these Palestinians were locals and they owned any land. So they then settled in Canaan, possibly with Egyptian permission. Now, the etymology of Philistines in Palestine. So the name Philistine derives from the Hebrew Pelishtim or Plishtim, linked to the root PLS, which can mean to invade, to migrate, or to roll, suggesting they were seen as invaders or migrants, but they were violent. We have records of them from the Egyptians. These were violent invaders. Nothing really has changed. Because
do you know that's very similar to the Syriac word magre, which is a migrant, to migrate.
Really?
And that is the term that was used for the Arabs. Isn't that interesting? It's very parallel.
Fascinating. Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Right. Now, the biblical term Peleshet refers to their coastal territory. So the English Palestine comes from the Latin Palestina, borrowed from the Greek Palestine, first used by Herodotus in the 5th century BC to describe a region between Phoenicia and Egypt, but not limited to the Philistine coast, which is a very narrow, very small strip of land. So while traditionally associated with the Philippines, the alternative scholarly view says that Palestine is a Greek pun on Israel from Palestes, wrestler. Now, Palestine today doesn't mean directly invaded land, but it does reflect ancient geographic and linguistic adaptations, later formalized by the Romans as Syria Palestina. So then we need to give Syria to the Palestinians too, then, as you said, Mel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, because the Syrians have to get out of there because, I don't know, do you think they have to go back to Poland or something?
Maybe they could introduce a two-state solution for them up there.
I'm with that. A two-state solution. They put the Palestinians next to the Syrians, and they can. You know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And this happened after 135 AD to erase Jewish associations with Judea. Now let's look at the Philistines, the settlements. So they settled. Okay. Look at the map. Mediterranean Sea. You have Jaffa, Yavne, Ashdod. Here you've got there's the Dead Sea, and this is Gaza. This is Philistia, right? And this is the route of the Ark of the Covenant after it's captured by the Philistines. So these guys, they steal the Ark of the Covenant and they wander around here. That's such something that's discussed in the Bible, oddly enough. So they arrive in Canaan, and the Philistines established a pentapolis, so known as a 5-city confederation along the southern Med coast. You have Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, also known as Tel Mikna, and Gath, Tel Asafi, right? And their territory extended from Joppa, modern Tel Aviv, Yaffo, southwards. They controlled fertile coastal plains and key trade routes like the Via Maris. Now, they invaded the Jews' territory. So archaeological evidence shows no Philistine settlements in Jerusalem or the Judean highlands. Their influence was primarily coastal. They had limited inland expansion, and they had brief incursions into Israelite territories. They did not occupy or settle in Hebron, Nablus, or other inland cities associated with modern Palestinian claims. Excavations show that you had a distinct Philistine material culture. That means their pottery and their objects, their architecture and so on, their jewelry, such as decorated pottery, hearths, and temples, which were concentrated in these coastal sites. Now, they declined and they assimilated. So by the 8th century BC, the Philistines were subjugated by the Assyrian Empire under kings like Tiglath-Pileser III and Sargon II. They became vassals and they paid tribute. In the late 7th century, about 604 BC, Nebuchadnezzar II of the Neo-Babylonian Empire conquered their cities. He destroyed Ashkelon and Ekron. He deported their populations and incorporated the region into his empire. Those cities don't exist anymore. Jerusalem still stands. If Moses, it's interesting that people say that Jews never settled the land. These Jews are all from, I don't know, you pick your country, Russia, Poland, Ukraine, whatever, and they're actually not Jews. But if Moses had to come back tomorrow, Jerusalem would still be there, right? If any one of these Jewish patriarchs who were in Jerusalem had to come back, Jerusalem would still be there, right? I mean, so Moses actually is probably before the settlement of the Holy Land. So anyone after, but you still have the religion, you still have the temples, you still have the language, you still have the culture, which is interesting. It still exists after all this time. She means that the idiot who was on before saying this is the indefensible can cry us a river. So moving on. So the Philistines, they're assimilated into surrounding Canaanite, Assyrian, and Babylonian cultures, and they lost their identity by the 6th to 5th centuries BC. So between 500 and 400 BC, they were gone off the map. Their DNA was erased. They no longer exist. They disappeared from historical records, and there's no evidence of continuity into later eras. The Jews were still around, though. The Jews were there before them, and the Jews were there after them. Any comments, Mel, before I go on?
Only that I know that in the last 200 years, in particular, a lot of Arabs came into the area of Israel from places like the Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and their immediate descendants, 2 or 3 generations, are claiming they are Palestinians, and so that's part of the mix of the current debate, right. But the other thing, something maybe you haven't mentioned, is that, when the Romans renamed the country back in the 2nd century, they drove out most of the Jews. So obviously people swept into the area and occupied it, and that's when you have this counterclaim that's been going on pretty much ever since.
But Muslims claim it's Muslims that lived there.
Yeah.
The Palestinians were Muslims.
Yeah. Well, actually, there was an interesting interview of Muslims on the street. I was on some channel, and they were asking people, what were the Muslims before there was Islam? You know, what were their ethnicity? And they were saying, no, they were always Muslims. So they couldn't imagine that their ancestors might have been Jewish or Christian or maybe pagan. They were saying, no, we're Muslim all the way back. It's just totally ahistorical.
That's crazy. That's insane. These people they're not well.
Yeah.
So last few slides. So modern lineage claims, right? Experts agree no modern population can prove descent from the Philistines. Nobody can do that. They died out. We know what their DNA is. We have their records. The DNA has been studied. There are no Philistines anymore. And their distinct culture and genetics were absorbed through assimilation and conquest. DNA studies show that the European genetic component introduced by the Philistines faded by the Middle Iron Age. So modern Palestinians derive primarily from, if you want to call them that, I'm being polite here, Palestinians, derive from ancient Canaanite and later Arab ancestries. Why? Because the Arabs invaded the region in the 600s. And there is no genetic or cultural link to the Philistines. These are Arabs who came later. The Arab DNA comes in the 600s, 700s. And so beyond the shared geographic name Palestine, right, there is no connection. And even the name Palestine is a later Roman imposition. Palestine is a Greek term. Palashet is a Hebrew term based on the Egyptian term, which refers to Europeans. So these are actually not the same. These terms are not interchangeable. You agree, Mel? I mean, these are different terms.
Yeah, definitely.
And so we need to understand context for each term. So the term Palestinian actually emerges in the 20th century for residents of the Mandate region, encompassing regional Arab Muslims, Christians, and Jews. And of course, then it's established as a fictional country in 1964 by King Yasser Arafat I. So why the anachronism? Simple. The modern usage of Palestine to describe Jesus' birthplace is from retroactively applying later geographic terms. Muslims are known for doing so. Mecca, where's the proof of Mecca existing in Muhammad's time? Where's the archaeology? Right? Where's the evidence in the Palestinian Museum? We might say the Iroquois lived in New England before the term New England existed. We're retroactively taking an area that we know, a concept we know, and applying it backwards. But there was no such place then. So some refer to Jesus as born in Palestine because the region was later named Syria, Palestina. That's the Roman term. However, this anachronism deliberately obscures the historical facts. Jesus was born in Judea, a Jewish region under Roman rule. It is weaponized as propaganda. Israel referred historically to the Jewish people, collectively tracing their lineage and identity back to the biblical patriarch Jacob, is also called Israel, and this is a written record that exists. So there's a record of Israel going back thousands of years. As a nation or kingdom, Israel existed under a united monarchy under leaders like Saul, David, and Solomon from the 11th to the 10th centuries BC. After Solomon's reign, the kingdom split into two separate entities, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, both of which persisted into the first millennium. That's the first 1,000 years BC. By the time of Jesus, in the early 1st century, the land of Israel was under Roman rule, a local Jewish population maintaining distinct religious and cultural identity. Because the Romans do not write about Palestinians. The Romans never mention Palestinians. People will say the word existed. Yes, the word existed, but there is no Palestinian people. And so their traditions continue back to the ancient Israelite kingdoms and are very much shared historical heritage, language, religion, and such. The British mandate for Palestine, last couple of slides, and we're done. Originally, this was the British mandate, right? And of course, you've got Lebanon up here, the French mandate. Then you have Jewish Palestine and you have Arab Palestine. 77%, the Jews for peace decided that they would cede 77% of the mandate to the Arabs. The Arabs have their own state. It's called Jordan. So these ungrateful Arabs, indefensibly, right? This is the indefensible part. They were given 77% of the land. And they want 100%. These are greedy people. This is the mandate for Palestine, July 24th, 1922. This shows the yellow, the Trans-Jordan, in which the reconstitution of the Jewish national home was to be postponed or withheld. So the territory of Jewish Palestine had been reduced by 77% of the original mandate. Yeah, anything more? You want
so that's something else. To agree to this, be willing to give up land with this agreement, and then the people who have on the other side who've accepted that agreement then come back and want more. It's like being given a share of an inheritance and then come and say, I'd like some more of your share.
Yeah, I want all the rest, in fact.
Yeah.
I mean, this is crazy. I mean, so the term Palestinian as an ethnic or national identity only comes up in the 20th century. It starts in the British Mandate period, 1918 to 1948, when it meant all residents, Jews, Arabs, and Christians, not just Arabs. Right? Yeah. And in Jesus' time, there was no such identity. Again, prove that there was one. I'll believe you when you prove to me there was a Palestinian identity. Name their kings, their coins, show me examples of their coins. What was their currency called? What was their religion? What was their language? What was their holy book called? Where were their temples? What did they build? What was written about them in political records? Nothing, because they are fiction. The residents of Judea were primarily Jews, with smaller populations of Samaritans and others. Jewish identity is explicit in the New Testament, where he's called a Jew, right? And this aligns with the cultural and religious context of Jesus, including the expectations of a Messiah from the tribe of Judah, descended from King David. Now, there were, of course, some historical developments post-Jesus. Now, this is the Bar Kokhba Revolt. And this is Lindsay Powell's book, the Bar Kokhba Revolt, AD 132 to 135. This is actually a stela. I think this is of the Jews carrying from that period, the Jews actually carrying this menorah. And so this is one of the earliest archaeological records that show there were Jews in this region. And
or is that the Rome, or would that be the
Romans capturing it?
Commemorating the Romans bringing the menorah away back to
Actually,
Rome.
it could be that. It could be the Romans having captured the menorah and carrying it away. It could well be that, yeah. But after Jesus' death, Judea remained a center of Jewish resistance. The first Jewish revolt in 66 AD culminated in the destruction of the Second Temple. So Jewish autonomy is weakened. Then you have the Bar Kokhba revolt, and there were severe Roman reprisals, including the renaming of Judea as Syria Palestina and the expulsion of Jews from Jerusalem. And there is the beginning of the diaspora. Then from 135 AD, Palestina became the official Roman name, persisting through the Byzantine, Islamic, Crusader, Mamluk, and Ottoman rule. Under the British Mandate, Palestine referred to the region encompassing modern Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza, with Palestinian denoting all inhabitants, Jews, Christians, and Arabs. So,
if you just go back one just for a second, we're talking about puns earlier on, but Bar Kokhba is a pun which means son of the star.
Bar Kokhba. Interesting. I didn't know that. Bar Kokhba, son of the star. Amazing.
Yeah. His real name was something else. It was similar, but not wasn't Kokhba.
Okay, so it's a pseudonym. So Star of David, son of the Star of David.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So yeah,
messianic name. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. So look, we're not asking the right questions. I mean, Muslims will lie. I just had a 2-hour spat on X with a stupid woman who would not admit that Muhammad, had a 9-year-old wife that he bedded. When you can provide Sahih Hadith after Sahih Hadith, she was denying every single Sahih source and then using literally weak Hadith to say, well, actually, like, they'll ignore everything, but you need to start pressing people. So fine, you say, look, I want to be convinced. Show me the evidence that there was such a Palestine people and state. Convince me and I'll believe you. I will even say the Shahada. What the heck? Just give me the name of the coins they used. Well, what is the currency? Right? Name their kings. Right? Name these Palestinian kings, this great Palestinian state. What was their favorite food? What did they export? All of these things I asked earlier. And what was their religion called? What language did they speak? This unique Palestinian people. Yeah, Mel, you're nodding your head there?
Agree. No, I'm just saying, I agree.
Yeah. So finally, I think this is the last slide. So Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea between 6 BC and 4 BC under Roman rule during Herod the Great's reign. the term Palestine was not an official designation in his time. It was an informal Greek term. It was a Greek term, an external group's term, not the local term. It was never used by anybody in the country for a broader region, possibly as a pun on Israel due to its similarity to Palestes or wrestler. And also, this is a book here called The Philistines and Their Material Culture by True Dothan, which discusses the Philistines as a complete set of outside Greek invaders. So they were not by any means indigenous. The official use of Syria-Palestina begins after 135 AD, more than a century after Jesus' death. Describing Jesus as born in Palestine or as a Palestinian is historically false. And sadly, we need to understand this. Muslims are willing to lie, taqiyya and all that. Jesus was a Judean Jew. He was born into the religious and cultural traditions of Judea, as confirmed with the New Testament and sources like Josephus and Philo. For further study, consult the New Testament. There's Matthew 2, Luke 2, Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, the Jewish War, Philo's works, and archaeological studies like True Dothan's The Philistines and Their Material Culture, published in 1982. And for the alternative etymology of Palestine, see David Jacobson's When Palestine Meant Israel, and I showed you that article. And that finishes that. So that's me done. I hope that was educational for everyone. Your thoughts, Mel?
Great. I was delighted to actually get clarity on that whole question, because it was always like a question mark over it. You know, where did this Palestine word come from? So that was great to see it connected to a pun on wrestlers. That was amazing.
Yeah, so I mean, there's actually multiple terms. It's not just Palestine. There's the modern term Palestine. There's the Greek term. There's the Roman term. There's Syria Palestina, and there's the Egyptian term.
Yeah,
and they all have their own particular history and connotations. So it's not just one term. It's like, you know, it's the same term that we have this global term Palestine, but actually, once you dig in, it's a very different history.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that wraps that one up. I thought the viewer that said this is trying to defend the indefensible, but I actually think trying to say the opposite is defending the indefensible, because once you start looking into the history of it, the history tells its own story. You know, we don't even have to do much interpretation. It's there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it doesn't. Palestine's a fiction. It doesn't exist. And Ave Maria says, great channel, Mel. Looking forward to watching. Yeah. So that's great. Yeah, Mel. So that's, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. You added a lot.
That's been great. Well, I'm surprised I could add anything to it, to be honest, but hopefully it broadened the conversation a little bit.
Well, I think it did. But, you know, two minds are better than one, you know, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. It's funny, earlier on today, I was thinking, I must get together with Lloyd at some stage. Well, it's been a while. Oh, God, great opportunity there today.
You know, we could just pick a topic that's non-controversial and discuss, you know, something not related to the Reformation. You know, so we can discuss something else related to Islam, or we can, you know, the whole existence of Muhammad thing. I wonder, we can also do a dissection. But I know that, you know, but I'm sure you're going to surprise the audience very pleasantly on that topic. Any sort of deadline or timeline for that?
Are you talking about the book?
Not the book. Just a reflection on the whole position of too many errors about the existence of Muhammad.
Myself, Jay, and Robert Spencer are going to, hopefully, if this doesn't change, are going to get together tomorrow to record a discussion on that, which will be epic. I've prepared a ton of slides. I've gone through all her 7th century sources, and I'm genuinely really glad she produced that list, because there was a lot of them that I wasn't aware of.
All right.
Maybe had seen 4 or 5 years ago and forgotten. But sometimes if someone challenges you, it forces you to dig deeper and really question things that you may not think of. So I have to give her credit for that. You know, she's really kind of made me discover so many gems. So I can't wait to do this with the two guys tomorrow. And Robert Spencer is not aware of much of the material that I'm going to share, and I'm sure he's got loads as well that he has to share. But when do you plan to release? If you're recording tomorrow, that's fantastic news, Mel. I'm very jealous and very excited. When do you? I hope it'll be released pretty soon. It'd be nice to get it out there fast rather than leaving us hanging for weeks and weeks, because really it needs to be fairly soon.
That's
hopefully
great.
they.
I mean, look, I have my issues with too many errors. In fact, I mean, at one point, I was using for about a year on my channel, I was calling myself Too Few Lloyds.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, yes, I forgot about that.
You know why, right? Because there's too many Marys.
Yeah, exactly. But I actually had to think about it the other day, and I was thinking, oh, what is the beef with Mary? And I actually realized that she started giving me beef just because I was a friend of yours when you were questioning Martin Luther and all that. Suddenly,
very factually quoting Martin Luther. I was quoting Martin Luther. I wasn't making anything up. I'm quoting the man.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. I'm. I don't know. Like, I'm sure your audience is kind of a mixed audience, but there's a particular type of Protestant that I cannot comprehend, which is they say they follow the Bible, but when you actually present them with a clear-cut passage from the Bible, they immediately throw it under the bus like it doesn't exist, or they reinterpret it. And it's like, if you cannot even read black and white texts and just accept it, I don't know what that is. It's kind of like, it's weird.
But Muslims do that. I had someone deny Muhammad. You know, they denied every single Sahih Hadith and want to give you scholars that come from, I don't know, that come from the 20th century that said something different. You're like,
yeah,
this is the established understanding. So yeah, Muslims do it. It's scary to me sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, like this guy that said that Jacob was wrestling Satan, and Satan is the guardian of Esau.
Oh, no.
Like, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, like seriously, where does it come from?
But like the whole thing, even like the stupidity of that is the name Israel. It's I think it's interpreted as wrestling with God. So therefore, how can it be Satan? Is God Satan?
Yeah, I know. And then how does God have the authority to change his name? Does God does Satan have the authority to change his name? And
yeah, that's just weird.
It's wrong in the face of it. Yeah.
I'll give you an example of the thing I had to deal with today, right? I posted this, what I consider a fairly innocuous post about Mary and the Immaculate Conception. And it was purely based on the Bible. It had nothing to do with church. Well, I'm obviously aware of what church teaching is. Or actually, was it entirely? No, actually, it was. No, I did. No, tell a lie. It was actually taken from a catechism. So no, I misremembered. But I was prepared to just argue the case for what it was saying, just on the basis of the Bible. So this person was saying that she had original sin, the same as the rest of us, when she gave birth to Jesus. And I said, but Gabriel says you are filled with grace. And I gave the person the actual Greek term, which literally means full of grace. Explain that one. Oh, it doesn't mean she was actually full of grace. They were arguing around it. They're trying to reinterpret it.
Yeah. No, I understand you there. It literally says that. I know that. I'm familiar with that. Another issue is, of course,
that I can understand. I can understand, just to finish, I can understand someone saying, you only believe this because the church teaches. That's fine. I can understand that mentality, but that's fine. Everyone's free to do that. But when something is clearly biblically based, and it takes mental gymnastics to come up with a different interpretation from the obvious meaning, which is the way we're meant to, we're meant to take the Bible literally, unless we're forced to use an analogy where the obvious meaning isn't there. That's the usual way of interpreting the Bible. We only go to plan, to the second or third meaning when the first one isn't a possible one. But the first meaning is clearly she's filled with grace. It doesn't mean she's a god. It just means filled with grace from God, which means she doesn't have original sin, because the two, you can't have the two together. It's one or the other. And she's the only one in the Bible
you think would get special status.
And no one else in the Bible has given that term, which means there's something unique about her.
She's the only woman named in the Quran as well, I believe. Yeah. And so, there's definitely, I mean, look, I do, that I'm not entirely popular on some channels because of my discussion of the Reformation, the history, the issues. But let's not get into that now. But I agree. There's definitely, I'll tackle that topic at some point as well. But so guys, let's call it a night here. Mel, your contribution's been fantastic. So I'll be back. I've got some other things to discuss. I'm thinking to do the SSPX and go into that for the coming week. I've been promising to get back into the whole Catholicism thing because, man, did that explode in my face last time. So,
braver man than me.
Oh, no. SSPX, that's just, you read that and you're like, what the heck is going on here? So, guys, that was that. Hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully you've gained a great deal out of it. And Mel's contribution, I think, really, and thank you to the audience for some really good questions and really great comments. And thanks to the idiots for a great laugh. We need to call a spade and a fool, I think. So yeah, guys, I hope you've gained something and I hope that you are able to use these little nuggets of information, that this is helpful to you. And you can use this in the defense of your own faith and dealing with what is really a Muslim onslaught, because they're fighting in the information realm and they're also invading your hotels. I'll leave it at that. And of course, no 12-year-old girl is safe. I mean, recently we had one of these people, these Plishtim or whatever the heck they are. They kidnapped, they diddled, and then they unalived a 12-year-old girl in the UK. And of course, the UK government, it came out yesterday or today, that news. And of course, they hid that because they don't want to inflame community tensions. Personally, I think you should be inflamed. And community tensions is the right response here.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it.
Yep. So guys, thank you. So Islam is attacking on all fronts. Use this information, and I wish you all well out there, and God bless, and I will see you guys soon. Thanks all. Take care.